Hello, and welcome to another episode of Contact Lens Spectrum Live, a live stream series presented by the publishers of Contact Lens Spectrum. My name is Lyndon Jones, and it's great to be here chatting to some of my friends and colleagues from around the world on the future of contact lenses. In each of this series of 3 programs, we've been discussing the challenges and opportunities for industry researchers and clinicians to optimize the performance of lenses that we have today, and also what the future holds for contact lenses. Today, it's a great privilege for me to welcome a long-standing friend and colleague from the UK. Dr. Carole Maldonado-Codina is a UK-trained optometrist who's currently a senior lecturer in optometry at the University of Manchester. She also happens to be Associate Director of the Eurolens research group based at the university. Carole graduated in optometry from Aston University in 1990 and worked in private practice before gaining both an MSc and then a PhD from the University of Manchester under the supervision of Professor Nathan Efron. She's a fellow of the American Academy of Optometry, a member of IACL, a council member of the ISCLR, a past recipient of the BCLA Irving Fat Award, and is also an external examiner for the UK College of Optometrists. She's authored over 60 publications, many of which I know because of how good they are, in the area of contact lenses and anterior eye, and as a regular speaker at international conferences all around the globe. Hi, Carole. Thanks very much for joining us today.
Hi.
To wrap up the series about the future of contact lenses. In this episode, we'll be discussing the extremely important issue of vision with contact lenses. Welcome, Carole.
Thanks, Lyndon.
All right, so let's begin our chat by thinking about a really important part of how we deal with patients in clinical practice, and that is about vision and its impact on contact lens retention. Give us your thoughts on that, Carole.
Yeah, so retention is an incredibly important area because the figures in our industry are not so good and we need to do something about it. But retention or discontinuation, whichever way you want to look at it, is fundamentally linked to vision. This is why people wear contact lenses. So we know at the moment that as many people are dropping out of contact lens wear as are being fitted in the first year of wear. And that figure is 25%. So 1 in 4 people are dropping out of contact lenses within the first year. And they do drop out quite early on in that first year. But what's important is that if we can improve that number, our patients will be doing a lot better. Practices will be more successful. And the increased revenue that manufacturers would enjoy would mean that we would have more investment into lens materials, new technologies, etc., etc. So it is a really fundamentally important area. And when people talk about discontinuation, they often talk about discomfort in the same breath. And it is true. We have evidence that discomfort is the primary reason for discontinuation in existing and wearers who were quite established. But we also know that for new wearers, vision is the primary reason for discontinuation. Actually, handling is also really important in new wearers. But if you try to drill down into the lens types that these discontinuers were using, you start to discover that the more complex lenses, if you like, are the ones that are especially causing the discontinuation. So, for example, in toric wearers, about 50% of those people that dropped out report that vision was the main reason why they dropped out in toric wearers. And then perhaps not surprisingly, if I then tell you that in multifocal wearers, it's over 70% of people who dropped out did so because of vision. So vision is really important in sort of driving this trend for lower retention as lenses become more complex. So if you like, the dropout is lower in new wearers in spheres, then it gets a bit higher in torics, and then it gets even higher in multifocal lenses. So absolutely critically linked to discontinuation. And one other point to make, I suppose, is that if vision and comfort are both important for retention, then so too is any link between the two. You know, a lot of work goes into looking at what might be the reason for discomfort, and we think about the physical aspects of a lens. You've published a lot on this, Lyndon. So is it something to do with the surface of the lens? Is it something to do with the edge? So there's lots of energy gone into what makes a lens uncomfortable. Or is it something to do with the patient's tear film characteristics? But other things like subjective appreciation haven't been looked at so much, and we published quite recently showing that subjective vision was very highly correlated to the comfort of the lenses. Surprisingly, the comfort wasn't correlated to the visual acuity from the consulting room. And actually, there's only a really weak link between measured visual acuity and subjective comfort. So to answer that question that you posed, Lyndon, as I think fundamentally vision is critical, as we would expect.
That's a great summary, Carole. Just fabulous in terms of, you know, really honing in on that importance of vision to patients, but also that link between vision and comfort. That's your recent work on torics was really a beautiful piece of work. So quite clearly for us as clinicians, getting things right with vision is critical. So give us some tips on how you think that eye care practitioners can actually optimize vision in their patients. What options are available to them?
Really important area. Think about an eye examination and how much time you actually spend tweaking and fine-tuning the sphere and the sill, and making sure that their glasses are going to be absolutely fantastic. And then all too often, when we fit a different device, a contact lens, some of that goes to pot and people's vision is compromised. So I think people are going to be really happy in their contact lenses if, I suppose, three things are fulfilled. So if, you know, the lens has good visual optics, if the lens material is such that we can get a nice tear film over the surface of the lens, very, very important. And I suppose factors related to how comfortable vision is. So if there's glare or photo stress or anything like that, which contact lenses can actually address as well. So the first thing is start with an accurate refraction and fully correct it. So we know that almost 50% of the population will have astigmatism of 0.75 or more in at least one eye. So it's really, really important to fit toric lenses when the sill is at, you know, 0.75 or above. It's not true. You know, I hear every now and then, and I've had conversations like this before with people that say, oh, well, if the sphere's large in relation to the sill, then the sill doesn't matter so much. But there's no evidence to show that a high sphere with a low sill is any less important than when the sill makes up the majority. And we recently published some work which just confirmed the really quite large body of evidence showing that 0.75 is the cutoff, if you like. We did a study where we actually custom made lenses that had 0.25 diopter sill, 0.50 sill, 0.75, etc., etc. And it was confirmed that it didn't make much difference less than 0.75, but 0.75 was the absolute cutoff. So there is a whole bunch of evidence out there that shows that correcting astigmatism is really important. And by the way, there's no evidence that aspheric lenses can mask astigmatism in any optical way at all. So fit toric lenses when that's needed. So if you're going to fit a toric lens, then you need to check that it's rotationally performing very well. This is important in high sills. You can create quite a lot of higher order aberration if you've got a lens that is wobbling about all over the place. And then I think if you've got a presbyope sitting in front of you, it's really important to get that presbyope into multifocals. All too often, contact lens wearers that are getting older are not going into multifocals. I think it's about 50% at the moment, if that sounds about right. I think so. They're going to be much better off in so many ways than in monovision or in, you know, some kind of single vision contact lens with glasses over the top. So really get people into multifocals and follow the manufacturer's guidelines. Some of the manufacturers have really nice fitting calculators that tell you what lens to pick, what lens to choose next if things don't go quite right. And all the evidence suggests that we shouldn't tinker around too much with the prescription at that stage. You know, make sure that the basic visual needs of your patient are satisfied with what the guide has told you, but then don't tinker too much. Send them away, let them experience their own environment. So that would be a tip for fitting multifocal wearers. If someone's got quite large pupils or their prescription's very high and they're not happy with their vision, you can think about lenses that correct higher order aberrations like spherical aberration. The thing to be aware of is that a lot of lenses on the market will correct the average spherical aberration in the population, and the person in front of you might be quite different to that average, and so a lens like that might not make a difference, and in some situations it could actually make the vision worse. So it's important to know about them, but also to know when they might not work. And as I alluded to before, really ask somebody about their subjective vision. Someone who's 20/20 in the consulting room can be really unhappy. Ask them about, well, when is the vision not good? Is it something to do with contrast? Is it something to do with sort of visual comfort? Are they getting lots of glare? There are lenses on the market that filter out high energy wavelengths, so the blue-violet spectrum, and those lenses might be worth a try because they will affect vision, the sort of comfort aspect of vision. And then don't forget about BV. BV, especially in digital device users, you know, problems with accommodation or deficiencies in ocular motor function can actually make a really big difference to vision.
Carole, what an absolutely brilliant variety of take-home messages. That's fantastic. I think you pretty much covered everything. Now, one of the things you kind of just briefly skipped over was the importance of the pre-lens tear film. I was fascinated by that. So how does that work? How does the tear film in contact lens wear actually impact vision then?
Yeah, I think in answering that question, it's quite helpful to remember that the anterior ocular surface provides the main focusing power for the eye. And the tear film is actually the very first and most powerful refracting surface. So the tear film was made to go over the bare eye, over the cornea, and it does a pretty good job most of the time in wetting the cornea. So our blinking mechanism keeps the surface of the cornea with this nice smooth profile. But as soon as you put a contact lens into the eye, I think we all know that the tear film is cut in half, the cornea is completely hidden. The poor tear film has to try and anchor itself onto the surface of some kind of polymer, you know. So the pre-lens tear film is much less stable, much less happy over a contact lens surface. And so although the blink mechanism can compensate for this, at some point it hits a critical sort of juncture. And if you're getting very poor wetting, then you're going to get loads and loads of variable vision. The higher order aberrations can actually increase by over 50% when you have really, really bad wettability. By the way, you also get terrible discomfort as well with the eyelid going over. But, you know, I think that the tear film's really important in digital device users as well. And it's not so much the length of time that somebody's using the digital device that is important, I think. But imagine you have a competitive gamer, they're going to blink less, their natural mechanisms are going to be hindered. They may well be very unhappy with the vision in their contact lenses. They're not thinking of visual acuity, they're just thinking about their vision in general. And the same applies with people with dry eye disease who you might tip over the edge. So the tear film is really, really important for good visual optics. Anything that affects the tear film is going to degrade the quality of the retinal image.
Yeah, and again, great advice there, Carole, in terms of you know, and realistically, you're reiterating what we hear on some of these other prior episodes that we've been looking at, and that is that even the best contact lens and solution in the world isn't going to work well if you have a compromised ocular surface. So if you want a successful lens wear, vision and comfort, make sure you look at what the eye looks like. Now the whole series of these have been called the future of contact lenses, and you beautifully covered what it is that we can do with existing materials in the market now to enhance vision. What do you think we're going to see in the future? What sort of things do you think manufacturers are working on to impact visual performance that we could see maybe over the next few years?
Yeah, well, if you're talking about few years, I think that in the shorter term, let's say, wetting is still going to be really important. We've talked about why it's important. So manufacturers spend a lot of time in incorporating internal wetting agents into contact lens materials. There's some really complicated polymer chemistry that goes on there. So it's not trivial to produce iterations, but I think we will see iterations in bulk and surface properties of materials, blister pack solutions, which contain surface active ingredients. But I think in the slightly longer term, that general principle, we'll be seeing things like encapsulation and grafting of surface active ingredients in cleverer ways. So Lyndon, you know all about drug release in contact lenses. So we know that we need more sophisticated ways of incorporating drugs into contact lenses so that we can get more controlled and sustained release. Well, you can envisage the day where some surface active ingredients are actually incorporated inside the lens and are released in that way, so, you know, to produce a lens that is self-moisturizing, or are they called self-lubricating contact lenses. So I think that, you know, I don't think that that's going to be all that far away. I'd like to think that that's not too far away. Things like custom lenses for aberration control, particularly in people who have diseased corneas, grafts, keratoconus, that kind of thing, and good candidates for these customized aberration control lenses are probably a lens type that doesn't move around too much. Yeah. So something like a scleral lens, those have had somewhat of a resurgence over the last few years. So, you know, we may well be seeing those, and things like improved toric stabilization, there's going to be increments and you know, improvements in that all the time, because again, in high sills, that rotation is going to produce higher order aberrations. And then we're going to see, I think, probably a lot of innovation in multifocal design. So when someone's got a hyad and they've got a small pupil, you can run into all sorts of problems if those lenses are moving a lot or if they're decentered. So producing lenses that have decentered optics, multifocal lenses, is something that no doubt we'll see. So it will, you know, we'll be able to manage people that we can't manage at the moment in multifocal lenses. I think that we'll see, you know, new generation diffractive multifocals. I think that the extended depth of focus lenses, which rely on higher order aberration, mainly spherical aberration at the moment, to increase that depth of focus, are going to improve a lot. And then if you're talking about really aspirational things. I think that, well, it might not be too far away, because actually at conferences we've seen abstracts talking about truly translating soft contact lenses. So I've forgotten what it's called now. It's got a suspended contact lens, which uses innovations on the front surface of the lens to actually allow the cornea to move behind that soft contact lens, to actually be looking through different optical zones. And that sort of innovation can move us away from the slight compromise of simultaneous vision. We might not be having to talk about compromise in the consulting room with some of our patients in the future. You can tell me if we got time to talk about smart contact lenses.
Yeah.
So I think the ultimate aim will be to try to mimic what the crystalline lens does. So the crystalline lens will go from distance to near like this. And I think the ultimate goal would be to try and do this in contact lenses. And so the contact lens has got to do that quickly. It's also got to be able to sense where you're looking. So it's got to be able to track the gaze. And that's not easy. That involves embedding microelectronics into the lens and somehow altering the optic part of the lens that people are looking through. So, you know, things like articles that you've written, Lyndon, talk about liquid crystals in the optic part of contact lenses. If you pass a current through those liquid crystals can reorientate, they'll change their refractive index, and they can actually alter the power of that contact lens. And then there are more mechanical methods of trying to do that, where the blink could potentially control fluid movement within different parts of a lens, or even move the lens away from the cornea, a bit like I was explaining before. So there are lots of patents and things out there, but yeah, the ultimate goal will be smart lenses that have these microelectronics embedded, and we'll need to worry about comfort and biocompatibility, to try and even match what we currently have in those smart technologies. And then I suppose augmented realities in something like the Mojo lens, which I believe is sort of slow down its development on the contact lens side, I think. But, head-up displays to try and help, for example, visually impaired people detect edges, here's a curb, here's a building. There's, masses of potential for that to be embedded in a contact lens as well. And then beyond that, in the distant future, there'd be so much call for that with things like sports people, retail. So I think those are all the things I can think of for what we might see in the more sort of closer future and the more distant future.
Carole, absolutely fantastic. That was a wonderful tour de force of looking at the impacts of vision with current lenses, as well as a glimpse into the future. Thanks very much for joining us on this issue on how to optimize vision in our contact lens wearers and the role that plays in successful contact lens wear and preventing dropouts. So just a reminder to those of you who've tuned in to look for prior episodes of Contact Lens Spectrum Live on the Contact Lens Spectrum page on Facebook, LinkedIn and YouTube, or on contactlensspectrum.com, as well as the transcripts of the show now appearing in the printed version of Spectrum each month. This actually brings to a close our series of 3 episodes on the future of contact lenses, which honestly to me looks pretty bright. Thanks for tuning into this and the prior episodes. And next up, we'll be handing this back to Dr. Jason Jedlicker with his, he can take the show on, where he gets to chat with friends and colleagues from around the world. Hope you've enjoyed the chats that I've had over the last 3 episodes. And thanks very much for spending your time with me these last few months. Thanks a lot. Cheers. Bye-bye.